Now, Natalie, you've been reporting extensively on how the hardcore left-wing NGOs of the sort, the George Soros types and so on, may have been behind or financing groups behind some of the Tesla demonstrations. Here's the president of the Soros-backed Open Society Foundation spruiking her Marxist credentials.
In this moment of volatile transition, many have turned to this Antonio's memorable quote: "The old is dying, but the new is not yet born." So the task ahead of us is now to discover a new moral imagination. Where are the people with the creativity that can shape, design, and build a new world that is yet to emerge? And we see the persistent power of human rights litigation, whether it's the South African government going to the ICJ or US lawyers that are stepping up to challenge the new administration's slew of executive orders.
So, Natalie, tell us briefly just what you have uncovered. You've been reporting on these NGOs and their links, however tenuous or real, to the sorts of Tesla demonstrations and so on. Just briefly, what have you uncovered?
Sure. Well, I think for them to admit that they're following the lead of the godfather of what cultural Marxism, Anthony Gramsci, that sort of makes the case right there that these people are extremely radical, far-left activists. But the Open Society Foundation is one of the top funders of a group called Indivisible, which here in the United States is responsible for organizing massive countrywide Tesla protests. And they've offered on their website, as I've uncovered, up to $200 reimbursements for these protesters, and in some cases up to $1,500 for these groups that are hosting community events. They like the idea that this is all organic, but it's not. It's funded by the same far-left people that have opposed Donald Trump for years.
And that's pretty terrifying. We've suspected this, haven't we, Natalie, that behind the scenes are these big groups financing what are supposed to look like spontaneous demonstrations, but in fact, I know you've uncovered people who quite happily get paid the $200 to turn up and protest against whatever it might be. Now, something a little bit amusing that you've also been covering. Since Donald Trump, he took over the Kennedy Center. He appointed himself in charge of it. And one of the things he's done is banning drag shows. And there's been quite the uproar, from the usual suspects, not to mention a bit of rewriting of history. Have a listen.
Drag has been around for centuries. Shakespeare performed in drag.
Natalie, I think they misunderstand. Shakespeare wasn't about drag. It was that men had to play the part of women. It wasn't drag, actually. But tell us about the Kennedy Center and what is going on there.
Well, I think that's what we call a revisionist history that I guess only George Soros could probably get behind. But look, in the same way that President Trump is toppling the sort of globalist, elitist economic world order that the United States of America has put forth for decades, the Kennedy Center, I think people in your audience should understand that that is sort of the high church of the DC swamp, of the cultural elite here, the sort of New York Beltway class, the DC betters who think that, they hate MAGA, they detest President Trump. So for President Trump to have gone in there and pushed back on the cultural filth and sewage that those people have jammed down the throats of, everyday Americans for years, I don't think you can overstate how impactful that is, and frankly, how probably traumatizing it is to the elites who used to use that beautiful building to host drag shows.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, Trump is moving on so many fronts. It's exciting times. How does everyone in America keep up with it? Are they, Natalie?
Well, it's the flood the zone strategy, which my wonderful boss, Stephen K. Bannon, sort of came up with. But look, I think that the flooding the zone strategy sort of carries a pejorative connotation with it. I think what it really is that the Trump administration has to work overtime to fix the errors, mishaps, and most importantly, intentional destruction of this country, right? When you have an open border, 10 million plus people let in, horrific trade deals, horrific Afghanistan withdrawals, horrific bungled Middle East peace plans, of course, President Trump is going to have full spectrum dominance and focus on every single issue with haste, because the Biden regime left this country in such shambles that they have to flood the zone. It's the only chance that we have to actually save this country.